Okay, so while that first bit of static grass on the second method is drying, we're going to look at some bushes and hedges. So what we've got here is some lichen, which comes in various colours. I get it these days from War World Scenics, but you can get it from Squires and various other people in various covers. Me, I go for the brown because, as you'll see in a minute, it can represent bush and hedge structure. Next we've got some rubberised horsehair, which normally comes in a square like that, and you just chop it off. Then we've got some Woodland Scenics polyfibre, which is brilliant stuff for things like climbing roses and ivy and things like that, because you can tease it right out. I'm hoping that's picking it up. And can be really quite fine. And next we've got some hanging basket lining, which, I mean, this is bog ordinary B&Q stuff, but all of these give us what I call structure to our hedges, okay? And we'll see what we do with them in a moment. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to split them out, in fact that's nicely split for me, into sort of hedge sized kind of bits, and we'll leave those two for later. Any of these little bits we can use for clumps of foliage later on. I've got neat Mod Podge this time and a piece of baking paper, and what I'm doing there is just a nice big splodge of glue, and then I'm going to pick the best side to go upwards and stick that on there. Okay, I'm doing the same with the next piece, and a nice big splodge of glue. Okay, and we'll do the same with a polyfibre. In fact, that bit of polyfibre I'm going to turn into two, and then we'll really sort of tease it out so that it's, I'm hoping you can see that because it's really fine. So we tease it out into a sort of nice fine bush shape, and again just a splodge of the old Mod Podge and stick it in. Okay, so the next two we need a pair of scissors for. The hanging basket lining, I'm just going to cut up a bit like that. Now you could use that for a hedge in that vein. What I'm going to do is just tease it apart a bit so that it becomes a bit more bushy shaped. Okay. That's great. And then exactly the same again. Just a big old splodge of glue and stick it in down there. Right, so again with the old horsehair, I find that this actually works quite well for quite a manicured hedge. So, you know, there we go. We can squash that in, and we've got a fairly nice big hedge. Or you can tease it open and have a slightly bigger bush with it. Less formed bush, but we'll go with this as a sort of slightly more formed version. So there we go. You know, it looks like the farmer's been along and chopped it, shall we say. Okay, so the glue is doing two things. Firstly, when we attack this with the hairspray and various other bits and pieces we're about to do, it means that stuff is not going to get blown all over the desk. Okay, so it gives it a bit of stiction hold. Secondly, when the glue's gone off, we can peel it off the baking paper, and we've got something a little bit more solid to glue our hedge onto the layout with. Okay, so that's why we do that way. I'm just going to wash this brush. Okay. So, having done that, what we'll do is we'll put some twig structure, shall we say, onto these. So, I'll put that out of the way. What I've got in here, no, not in there, is some 4mm brown static grass. Now this particularly comes from Microrama, but quite frankly any brown will do. And I have what is called deballed it. Okay, so 1 and 2mm shouldn't need to do this with, but anything over that inevitably balls. So there's a deboiler. That comes from World Scenics, but quite frankly, any grate like that will do. And there's a ball of 4mm brown. Okay, so that's no good in your static applicator, because all that's going to do is sit there and a few will peel off, but you'll end up with that ball still there. So what we do is, I'm hoping you can see in there, effectively I'm just rubbing that ball up and down in the grate in the bottom, and you can see that very quickly we've split that entire ball up into some nice easy fibres on my piece of newspaper that can then go into our container ready to be static. I always recommend doing that with anything above 2mm static grass, because it just makes it a whole load easier for the grass to behave in the manner that we want it. Okay, so here we are with the right grill on and some 4mm brown that we were looking at earlier, and all I'm going to do is pop my probe underneath the grease proof like that. I'm going to get the hairspray and I'm going to spray my structure. Okay, now this doesn't have to be done with all the same colour. You could use different coloured browns or vary the length of your static or whatever, but for this purpose we want these hedges to be relatively similar. So all I'm going to do is static on some brown twigs. Okay, so what we're doing there is creating a twig structure. Okay, so next thing we do is we get some ordinary green 2mm. There's the mix, it's actually the same one we were using earlier. A little bit more hairspray. And then in with the green one. Now again, this step could be missed out. In fact, I think I'm going to need a bit more. Yeah, time for a refill. So that step could be missed out if you wanted to give some variation. And there are plenty of colours that would make things very different in terms of the look of these if you were looking for variation. And actually I always think variation is a good thing in landscape modelling, because that's what you get in real life. So we'll pop a bit more hairspray on those, and then we'll go in with the static again. Okay, so, and we can go through that with several different colours if we so need. In this case I'm quite happy with what we've got there. So next what we'll do is we'll get some flock on them just to give them a bit of variation of texture. Okay, so what I've got here is a series of fine turfs and various things, some from Woodland Scenics, so that's their weeds version, some from Footpath Scenics, which come from Model Scenery Supplies. Just lots of different colours. There's some Model Tree tree shop stuff in here as well. So basically all I'm going to do is take one of our hedges that have now got the green on, and I'm going to put some flock on it. Now I use these little squirty bottles, they're condiment squirt bottles. I fill them with the flock, and it just allows me to finely position the flock once we are sprayed. So I'll do maybe that one as well, and we'll get a bit of, yeah, that will do. So the idea is just to give us a bit of texture breakdown and a bit of colour breakdown variation. So next one, copy that one. And again, some I sometimes leave just with the plain static grass finish, and others I will add just a little bit just to give a bit of extra texture. And then last one I'm going to use is this one, which I use an awful lot of because it blends everything together. It's a Woodland Scenics fine blended turf of the green blend variety, which is D1349. I use this scatter all the time for all manner of things because it's just really quite a nice little blender. So just, and that kind of thing will just give us a bit of variation again. And again. So I'm hoping that's showing up on the bid. And we'll pop something there as well. Okay, so that's our first shot at the hedges. Okay, so now what we're going to do is sit those over to one side and let them have a breather, and just harden the glue off a little bit. And in the meantime, we go back to the diorama, and we're going to put on the second layer of the static grass with the second method. Okay, so it's exactly the same scenario as the first one. We're going to put splodges of glue on. This time I'm using some 1mm Dead and 1mm Winter from WWS War World Scenics range. But quite frankly, it's the method we're talking about here, not the colours. You can vary the colours as you see fit to get lots of different effects, but if you understand the method, then you're able to do that. So what I'm doing now is just splodging on, mainly in the gaps, but I'm still leaving some gaps. And the important thing is, even when you can't quite see the the bits of glue you've got here, if you've contacted glue on the layout, then you're probably going to get some static to stick there. So the thing here is not to be overzealous and just get some nice bits in. One thing I have noticed from looking at grass is that the edges of almost every grass have a sort of slightly dead grass bit to them. So hopefully you can see there, I am doing that round the edges here. And I'm not worried about if I get any of this second layer on top of the first. That'll work quite well. That's the one reason why we've left this round about an hour, hour and a half, so that we don't pick up any of the first layer of green. Works actually better, even better, if you leave it completely overnight. But obviously we've not got time to do that with this game. So, and again, what I'm trying to do here is represent that dead patch by the edges. Okay, so just want to get some glue, grass on here before we lose the glue completely. So we'll do that and then we'll get the next bit done. So here we are, 1 mil. Okay. So hopefully you can see that we've got various patches still there, and we're getting a bit of an uneven, and we're getting a bit of that dead. I'm just going to do a little bit over here as well, for two reasons. The first, and the other thing I forgot to mention, is really regularly I'm dipping this brush in some water over here and just drying it on an old dead t-shirt. Okay, that's doing two things. It's making sure no glue holds any of the bristles together, but it also means I can go through this exercise again and spread it out again. Okay, so over to the other side, and first thing we're going to do is that sort of layer of dead on the edge, and then a few more bits, but I'm also going to put a fairly thick layer of this dead underneath where the field's going to go, because even in a field of corn you get, or wheat, you get fresh shoots coming up underneath, or weeds or whatever, so you still need some underlayers in there. So again, that's still the 1 mil mix we spoke about, and there we go. So give that a quick blow, and I'm also going to get my little brush just to clean out the roots a little bit from it. There we go. Okay, so here we are, and we're going to do the third stage of the static grass. So again, washed and dried brush, and similar type of thing, and then we're going to come in with some 2 mil static grass on top of. So what I'm doing here again is just got a bit on my brush, and I'm covering quite a lot here, filling the gaps and also on top of some of the existing stuff, but in a sort of mottled pattern that just, what we're doing here is we're giving the upper layer of static grass that's actually going to give us the colour of the grass. Now we've got the under texture, and we're trying not to cover up all of the under texture, but we're also trying to get enough of the upper layer to present the overall picture. So again, what I'm looking for here is just little spots and dots and dabs off the brush, which is why it's so important to keep cleaning it and drying it. And again, this second layer has probably had actually a couple of hours now to dry, so none of it's coming up on the brush, but ideally, as I say, we're leaving it overnight. Okay, so we'll do this side first. On with our 2mm. There's 2mm, again, summer green with a bit of toning down from the winter 2mm, and okay. So I'm just going to clean a little bit out of the ruts, but it's generally getting there now, I think. And we'll put some close-ups of it on, but hopefully you can see that there we've got a fairly varied, both in terms of colour and texture, of a bit of grass, which is much more, to my eye, reminiscent of cow pasture than over here, which is much more tightly mown sheep type pasture. But again, it's the real knack is taking the techniques and using them to replicate what you see. Okay, so we'll give that a quick wash and a dry, and then we'll go over the verge bits over on the other side. So what I'm doing over here is a verge strip, and then the field will be behind it. So definitely a difference in colour and texture between the two, which is what we're looking to replicate. And that's going to help us. Okay. Alright, so now what we'll do is get ourselves set up for some 2mm straw type colours. So what I've got here is some 2mm of War World Scenics' farm field range. They've got various different colours. There's the packet, and what I'm looking for here is a mix of colours, because again, you never see any field that's equally growing in equal numbers. And finally, some Magiflock, which is Microrama beige, which again is going to give us a nice little variation in colour. And so give that a good shake. They're mixed up quite nicely, so we'll put the 2mm mesh on. And again, what I'm looking at here now is not wanting to spread the static grass onto the verge bit, so I'm masking off and I'm hairspraying, and then we're going in with the static. Okay. So there we go. That is where we're at for the moment. Okay, so while that last layer of grass is drying, and hopefully you can see how that's looking, we're going to do just a little bit of weathering on the churn block. And a couple of things I use for this kind of thing on a building. World War Scenics again, weathering powders, just kind of nice browny earthy colour. Hoping you can see that effectively. It's just gentle downward brushing with a soft brush. I've also got some Atwood Aggregates Meldon Stone Dust. Those of you that know that I'm a Southern Railway modeller will understand why I've got Meldon Stone, although actually it's not the greatest colour for replicating Meldon Stone in model form, but from a weathering point of view it's actually quite good stuff, because it gives you a sort of greenish tinge to your weathering powder. Okay, and finally just a little bit of black soot, again from World War Scenics, and really what we're looking at there is just in these bottom corners to try and simulate a bit of damp in the brickwork. You really have to be quite delicate with it, otherwise you put too much on and it looks a bit of a sight. But, the light earth, and the job will be good there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's good enough, I think, to be starting to think about going in place now, which is good because we want to rock around it with our hedges fairly shortly. Okay, so again, while that's all drying, the other thing I want to talk about is weeds, plants. So you'll have seen from the bushes that we built that actually it's really easy to build up layers on layers on layers of 2mm, 3mm, 2mm, 4mm static grass to get a nice, good, the technical term is treeing effect. It's effectively a build-up of lots of static grass. These things can be made to be really quite good, and a lot of commercial products give you stuff like this, which is just vegetation. This one is a Martin Welberg product, which comes like this. That's 15 quid's worth. Model Tree Shop will sell you these. Martin, really good guy. If you find his YouTube channel, lots of good tips on this, that and the other, including various static grass methods. But you know, that's really smart. It's quite good. What you do is you pare off a little bit off of here and you stick it on, and it just gives you various sort of options in terms of undergrowth. It's great stuff. Can't knock it at all. me, I make my own. Again, on a piece of greaseproof baking paper, layer of the Mod Podge, various layers of static and flocks seen with the bushes we've made in situ here, and then once that's all dried off, the whole lot will peel off the backing paper, and then you can tear off random bits which give you bits of sort of scenic material to be stuck on in various places. Now, I like these better than the clumps that are widely available, because the little clumps of static grass, just static grass, to me, for UK type scenery, seem to be a little bit unrealistic. I much prefer a mix of the static grass and the flock, like the modern Welberg one, because it gives you a far better variation. So I make this stuff by the rather large load, and you can see here we've got another similar kind of bit of static grass and flock there, and you know that's all just built up static grass, and it must be 10 mil deep. That's sort of layered on top of each other in the tree and exercise. And then we've got a bit of a hedge as well, which I can break a bit off there, and we've got a nice little constructed hedge, which again just starts off as layered static grass, so that might sit sort of there-ish, gives you an idea of what we're going to do. And again, that just peels off, gives you can see little spots of glue to start with, to start the static off. Quite often I leave this sort of subsidiary bush alongside, but if I wanted a really manicured hedge, I might think about chopping that off, so we've got a nice good sort of even bit of hedge. But that's how I do it, and you know, really easy, bit of baking powder, same baking paper, and the same static grass and flock that we've used already over there. So we're going to use those when we get to the detailing of this. So we'll come to that when we get to it, but really we're not far off being able to glue on our hedges now, so that'll be the next bit.